Okay, we are live right now. Hello, everybody. If you are joining us, you are joining us for Lessons of Love, which is a weekly review on A Course in Miracles workbook lessons. My name is Craig Villarrubia, and I've been a course student and teacher for about 10 or 15 years. And I'm really excited to come to you today from Hawaii. It's early morning here. And for those of you who are watching live, it may be a little bit later wherever you are. But today comes out of inspiration to want to share and stream. I have not done a kind of episodic weekly live stream in quite some time, so I'm excited to approach the new year with these Lessons of Love episodes. So just to give you a heads up of what you can expect over the next 50 minutes or so, my intention is not to regurgitate or read word for word the lessons. My intention is simply to take a moment to review the week's lesson and pause and contemplate the lessons and kind of integrate or hopefully expand our awareness of the lesson's intent and what it aims at. If you have questions, there is a chat room, so please, by all means, chat. This is a very informal 50 minutes that we'll spend together. If you want to come into the room, I bet you there's a way for me to get you into the room. Haven't figured that out yet, though. Yeah, so here we are. It's the first week of the year. We've had 7 lessons. If you're doing A Course in Miracles, you've gone through 7 lessons, and I'm really excited about these lessons. These lessons are the first lessons, and I think there's some of the most powerful lessons in the Course. Now, certainly all the lessons are powerful, and the Course says, one lesson fully accepted is enough to bring about the effect of the result that the Course is aiming. And on that note, I'd just like to take a moment to read what is the aim. Now, this is A Course in Miracles, and I think it clearly in the introduction of the workbook, it says, the purpose of the workbook is to train your mind in a systematic way to a different perception of everyone and everything in the world. So it is to shift perception. So how we currently see everyone and everything in the world, to shift the way we see that. So that is a miracle. Now, most of us are used to hearing the definition of miracle being a shift in perception from fear to love, and it's the same thing. It's seeing the world of separation, that's fear, into a way of seeing the world where everything is whole, where it's recognized that everything's working in perfect order. All things work for good, A Course in Miracles says. Only in the ego's interpretation can that be different. So we're here, our aim is to train our mind to see the wholeness. Now, that doesn't mean much from the perspective of a separate body or from the perspective of a separate self. But what the workbook is aiming to do is to train our minds to be able to see it. And so this week, our first lesson was, nothing I see means anything. So let's just contemplate that first lesson. Nothing I see means anything. Now, if we think about any time we've suffered, we would recognize that it is because we have placed meaning on something, on a situation, on a person, and somehow that meaning is threatened. So, for example, if I have a brand new car, then there's meaning that that car has for me. If I have a wedding ring, there's meaning that is placed on this wedding ring. So when this wedding ring is lost, there's suffering. So there's been meaning placed on the wedding ring, and when the wedding ring is lost, not that I'm trying to lose my wedding ring, but if it were to be lost, then there's suffering. And so everything that we see has meaning. And it may be very meaningful. It may not be meaningful. There's certainly a level of conviction of meaning with things. Certain things may not mean as much to some of us as others. But what's important to recognize here, and what the Course is aiming to do as we practice idea of looking at objects in the room and recognizing that nothing I see in this room means anything, what we're doing is we are bringing a sense of neutrality to all the objects that we see, knowing that placing meaning or things having meaning inevitably will cause us to suffer because everything in the world is subject to destruction and decay, including the body. The body, there's no meaning. The body I see has no meaning. But if it has meaning, which it does for many of us who are still working our way through expanding our mind or expanding our consciousness, the body has meaning. So when the body is getting older, we suffer. So the Course is saying we're training our mind to look at objects, things, and remind ourselves that it doesn't have meaning. Now, why is that important? Well, when we start to withdraw meaning from the world, then what has been obscured, which is wholeness, love, can emerge. In other words, if you imagine looking at the ocean, you have this vast Pacific Ocean. Sometimes I'm looking at the satellite. I'm in Hawaii, and every now and then I love looking at the satellite, um, Google satellite maps to see how far Hawaii is from both the United States and from the Pacific countries. We're like in the middle of nowhere. So if you imagine from where you're looking at the ocean, and then all of a sudden I see Hawaii, and now Hawaii's where I live. It has meaning. And so Hawaii, the symbol of Hawaii, all of a sudden, the moment that I've given meaning to the speck, as I'm looking at the ocean, the moment I give meaning to the speck, then the ocean is obscured. In other words, my focus and attention is on the little object in the middle of the Pacific called Hawaii. My focus and attention is on it and the meaning I gave it. And it comes at the cost of excluding the ocean. So when things in this world have great meaning to us, it comes at a cost of the wholeness. So as we train our mind to recognize that nothing in this world has meaning, then we begin to open our mind to a wider perspective. Remember, the whole aim of the Course is to help us see the world differently. And to the ego's thought system, that may be a little scary. It's like, oh my God, this ring, I paid so much money for it. I worked so hard. Which brings me to the second lesson. And the second lesson says, I have given everything I see all the meaning it has for me. So just as I'm about to justify the meaning that this ring has, I worked so hard for it, it means someone loves me, it means I'm committed to someone or something, all the meaning that something has for me has been given by me through my story. The story we tell ourselves in our mind that we've accepted as truth. Now, this is an unconscious attempt by the ego's thought system to create an experience of separation and a sense of me. In other words, by giving meaning on things, I define not the things that I've given meaning to, but I define myself. So, for example, for me, a beautiful day means I'll have an exciting afternoon, and a beautiful flowers means that um, you know, beautiful flowers means someone loves me or something like that. Any meaning it's just is there to define me as Craig and what Craig values in the world as a person. And these values as a person and the meaning that Craig has given everything serves to maintain a sense of Craig. Now, the whole point of the Course is, again, to come into a wider perspective of our identity, not as separate Craig, but as the wholeness of spirit. So everything I see, I've given the meaning it has for me as an attempt to define me as separate. So as we practice this idea, I've given everything I see the meaning it has for me, we are bringing to the forefront of our awareness, wait a second, it's my story. See, up until now, up until we've been introduced to these spiritual concepts, this conditioning has happened without our awareness. We've accepted the stories and the meaning things have had for us without question. So now we're reminding the mind, we're reminding ourselves, wait a second, I'm the one who's given meaning to everything. And I've decided the meaning it has to me. And so it doesn't necessarily evaluate that. In other words, we're not guilty of giving meaning to the world. We're not guilty of giving meaning to things, but rather with the awareness, we can now make a different choice. It also doesn't mean we need to sacrifice. It only means that we are becoming aware of how powerful our mind has. So powerful, in fact, that it's created an experience of separation. And if you wanted to, for example, just begin to think about, what is it that I've given meaning to and what is it that I value? Just look around and look at the objects. In my at the ranch in my house. I'm not at the ranch right now. I'm in Kona, in on the west side of the island. But the ranch, you'll see a lot of spiritual books on my shelves. You'll see spiritual movies, and so all these things kind of give clues as to what the personality of Craig enjoys and has identified with. And not that there's anything wrong with it. It's beautiful. Many of those books and tools have a lot of meaning and have served their purpose well for the Craig who is on this spiritual path, who is awakening and so forth. But even that has no meaning. As we accept this idea fully, truly, or truly, then even that has no meaning. And what does that do? That it releases any attachment to the identity that's trying to awaken, that's trying to make something happen, or trying to hold on to things of the world. Because even spiritual books, even the Course, that's a thing of the world. Even the Course has no meaning, and I've given it the meaning it has for me. So again, it's not that there's anything wrong with giving meaning to things. It's simply to bring the mind to the awareness of how it's operating. And in our moments of suffering, because we know how the mind is operating, we can best shift perception from fear to love now that we see how the mind or thought system is operating. So that was lesson 2. I've given everything I see in this room all the meaning it has for me. Lesson 3, I do not understand anything I see in this room. I do not understand anything I see in this room. That was lesson 3. With this conditioning of the mind, we have assumptions about things. So there's a lamp, and so my assumption about the lamp is its purpose is to light me up so that you guys can see me. I think I understand what this iPhone is for. It's certainly to send emails and respond. So we have this assumption or this preconceived notion of what the purpose of things are. And so we are seeing the world from one standpoint, and that is the standpoint of the person, of the ego. So everything that I see and everything's purpose is decided already by the egoic thought system, the ego, the person, the person who understands, if we are to experience a shift in the way we see the world, which again is the aim of the workbook, then we must be willing to be wrong about the purpose of things in this world and how we understand it. We have to be wrong about our understanding of things in order, again, for the truth of the wholeness of, of reality to make itself known. God will not impose, source, love does not impose itself onto us if we are choosing to see or choosing to see differently. In other words, if there are blocks to the awareness of love's presence, love isn't trying to combat it. It is our responsibility to accept the atonement for ourselves, which is to accept the correction for ourselves. So this lesson, I don't understand everything I see in this room or anything I see in this room, is a lesson to help clear our mind of our or our assumptions. In fact, it actually says the point of the exercise is to help you clear your mind of all the past associations to see things as they appear to you now. If I see the lamp and I've already decided that I understand what the lamp is, then I'm seeing through the filters of what I've decided ahead of time, or ahead of this moment, or I'm not in this moment, one can say, because the decision has already been made. So I'm not seeing things as they are. I'm seeing things as I've decided them to be. You see the difference? When I'm assuming that I understand what I see, if I assume I understand what I see, then I'm blocking from my awareness the truth, the true understanding. I'm not seeing it for what it is. I've already decided ahead of time, and so it will rear its the images will rear itself from an ego's thought system perspective, or from the filters of the ego's thought system. Let me give you an example. This has happened. I know many people have had this experience where, when I was younger, I didn't get along with my brother. In fact, him and I always would get into fights and everything. And every now and then, he would, ask for favors, and I'd be so reluctant because I had so much anger towards my brother and didn't get along. And I can't remember exactly what it was. It may have been the keys or something, but I remember once my brother was in a position where he couldn't like get up or something, and he was just like, "Can you grab the keys for me?" And I'm like, "I can't find the keys." He's like, "Well, look in the kitchen. They're in the kitchen." I'm like, "I can't find the keys," and I just had this insistence that I couldn't find what he wanted me to find, which were the keys. And I opened the doors, and I looked in the drawers, and trying to find the keys, but I had already decided that I couldn't find the keys. And so the keys never showed up in my awareness. And then all of a sudden, he finally got up or whatever, came around, opened the drawer, and says, boom, they're right there. Now the keys were there all the time. I had missed it. It's almost like I had decided that I wasn't going to be helpful. And in my decision not to be helpful, I didn't see what he was looking for, what he wanted from me. So I share that as an example of how the mind, when it is already determined that it understands and that it knows, everything it perceives will work to make that true. In other words, the ego thought system is trying to prove itself right always. See, there's the proof. See, there's the proof. There's the proof. This lesson says, I do not understand anything I see in the room. So as we look at objects, we're opening our minds to say, wait, I'm willing to not make the assumption that I know what everything is. I don't. Because if I come into the room, the street, the company of others, if I walk into any place with the assumption that I know or I understand things, then the mind is just going to seek to prove itself that it understands it, all the while missing the opportunity to be present with what is and allowing what is in the moment to be what it is and have the experience and the connectivity with everything as it is. And so we get so caught up in our assumptions and in our stories of knowing and understanding that we blind ourselves to the present reality of truth, which is an experience. It isn't intellectual. And our stories are itself mean nothing, which is what lesson 4 brings us to, which says these thoughts do not mean anything. They are like the things I see in the room, on the street, from this window, in this place. That's right. Now this is probably one of my favorite lessons. If we're hearing this with complete acceptance, these thoughts do not mean anything. That means every thought that is thought means nothing. It is like a cloud. Now, from the experience of the ego's thought system, or from the experience of believing the story, we take our thoughts as reality. It has become reality for us in the experience of separation. But what the Course is saying is these thoughts don't mean anything. So now we can understand how we are freed from fear. Because if we look at fear, what we will recognize is fear is nothing other than a story we're telling ourselves. And the story always has to do something about the future or the past. So the story is always in anticipation of something. I'm not going to be able to make, my rent. I'm not going to be able to fulfill my commitment, or, I'm about to lose something. So it's always this anticipation of some kind of loss, lack, fear, and it's a thought system. And it's also thinking thoughts about the past. I feel guilty. I did this. I did that. I wasn't honest. I didn't behave. Or when you're in a room meeting new people, will they like me? Will they not like me? Did I say the right thing? Will I say the right thing? Let me prepare. Let me say the right thing by memorizing these things to say. So you see, all these thoughts and thinking, which typically we accept as truth and we buy into it, and we think we are the person following those thoughts, and we think we are the person speaking those thoughts. And so we're in this trance of thought. And from this experience, or of being in this trance of thought, we are blocked from the awareness of love's presence. Love's presence isn't something to be thought about as much as it is to be experienced. And the experience comes from the freedom of no attachment to the thoughts. This is not saying that thoughts are bad or that thoughts can't be there. Thoughts may appear. Clouds appear, but it doesn't put out the sun. Clouds move along. They may block the sun temporarily, but they don't put it out. So this isn't about controlling thoughts. Notice, the lesson doesn't say, these thoughts that don't mean anything, you need to stop thinking. That's not what it's saying. The Course is not saying you have to stop the thinking. This lesson is just saying these thoughts do not mean anything. Thoughts do not mean anything. Wow. Doesn't mean thoughts can't come and go. But what I find most helpful in my experience as I contemplate these lessons and I take that in for a while, I recognize, of course, that makes sense. In the sense that if we take a moment to just be present, just be right here in this relaxed conversation, or this relaxed listening, you may have thoughts right now. But there's something that is witness to the thoughts. There's a presence that is unaltered by the thoughts, regardless of what the thoughts are, and that watches the thoughts. And thoughts are so random. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have some crazy thoughts sometimes. Crazy thoughts. What the ego likes to do is the ego likes to judge those thoughts. So the ego would say something like, oh my God, you're such a horrible person for having those thoughts. Such a horrible person for having those thoughts. And now I feel guilty. Oh my God, I judged that person. And I had this thought that, I just wanted to slap that person in the face or something, and how awful I am. No, the Course is not saying to judge against your thoughts. It's just saying it doesn't mean anything. Now I'm free. So you mean that crazy thought I had about the counter person at the Starbucks? That doesn't mean anything? Doesn't mean anything. There's a baby crying next door, I think. I don't know if you can hear that. And then there's a thought of like, that's gonna somehow disturb this presence that we're experiencing together here. But that's a thought. Now, what the ego would do is the ego would get mad and say, that's a thought to be taken seriously. There's loud noises coming from outside. It's going to ruin the experience for everyone on this live stream. You need to, do something about it, but you can't leave the camera. Maybe close the window, step away, apologize. So you begin to see how when we take the thought seriously, then we start to organize, and because we've judged against the thought, we're trying to manipulate circumstance in our mind and in form, and that leads to suffering. Lesson 4 says these thoughts do not mean anything. I mean, that's beautiful. I think that's like one of my favorite lessons. Change all the time depending on when you ask me, but right now that's one of my favorite lessons because it's so freeing that none of the dialogue that is going through our mind means anything. And if it does seem to mean something to us, it is only because we've given it the meaning it has for us. So it puts in our lap the responsibility to decide, to atone, to correct. Lesson 5 says, I am never upset for the reason I think. I am never upset for the reason I think. This is another good one. Yesterday I was at Starbucks, and I had walked into Starbucks and it was quiet, and the counter people were working behind the register, and I had shown up, and I'm ready for my tall light foam soy latte and my toasted everything bagel with cream cheese, and I'm waiting, and they're doing their thing, and I'm waiting some more. So then finally, of course, I give the woman like the look like I'm here, like, and she finally recognizes me, and she turns around. She's like, I'll be with you in 1 sec. And now I feel like upsetness starting to come up. And it was beautiful, beautiful. When the Course talks about using the world for the purpose of forgiveness, this is exactly what the Course is talking about. And so I can feel myself getting upset. So then the question is, well, this is all happening as I'm waiting at the cash register. So the thought comes up, what is the meaning I'm putting on this? Well, the longer I have to stand here, the more time I'm wasting. I can be doing something else, like working on my computer and letting people know about this live stream event. And so there's a dialogue now in place. Now notice there's meaning given to this experience of not being helped. In time, there's thought of time, giving time meaning, and having the thought, I'm wasting time. And what does that mean to Craig, who's identified as someone who maybe wants to use time very efficiently? So you start to, so I can see it just in a moment, just kind of like see all of that unraveling. And doing the course workbook is really living these principles. So, to the best of my ability and with the awareness that is available to me in that moment, to say, wait, I've given everything all the meaning it has for me. Do I want to hold on to this meaning I've ascribed, the power that I've assigned to this situation to affect me in the manner that it is currently affecting me, in which is I'm upset, I'm disturbed, my mind is caught up organizing its thoughts and justifying why I have the right to be upset. All of this is happening. Do I want to hold on to that? And in an instant, with the willingness to say, oh, my thoughts don't mean anything. The woman behind the counter and what the circumstances is about doesn't mean anything. Now, with attention or attachment kind of dissolved, I can just be timeless. And this is all happening within a couple of minutes. And within no time, she came up and with a big old smile, sure, what can I ring up for you today? Tall, light foam, soy latte, toasted everything bagel with cream cheese. I'm never upset for the reason I think. In other words, I'm not upset because of anything she did. Every now and then when we get upset, we're really quick. I wouldn't even say every now and then. I would say pretty much when we're upset, we 99.9% of the time believe that the upsetness was caused by something in the world. Someone did something against me, someone hurt me, someone didn't do what I wanted them to do. And so we ascribe cause to the upset in the world. And so what this is saying is I'm not upset for the reason I think. I'm not upset because of what happened out there. I'm upset because of something that's held in mind. My tendencies to give meaning to things, my tendencies to believe in the story in my mind. That is the cause. And the good news about that being cause is I'm in the position to accept the atonement, the correction for myself. But I must understand, I must have an awareness of where the cause is. I must be willing to relinquish my judgment against the world for what I think they did against me. So, with the willingness to release judgment from the world and to accept responsibility for the atonement, I can now be open to the miracle, which is a shift in the way I see everything in the world. Lesson 6 says, I'm upset because I see something that isn't there. Well, in the example that I just shared in Starbucks, it was the story in my mind that got me upset. It was the judgments being formed in the mind that got me upset. It was the assumption. Now, mind you, if I'm at the cash register and I'm waiting, it's obvious that I was assuming that I would be helped and taken care of and rung up as soon as I got there. So it is all of our assumptions, our stories, our belief in our stories that is what upsets us. That is what's the cause. And that cause is a scenario, it is a picture in our mind. And that picture in our mind is not reality. I'm upset because I see something that is not there. When I say someone is unfair, I put unfairness there. It is in my mind for which I see the person as unfair. It is the belief for which I project out, or it is the belief for which creates a filter in which what I see comes back to me or I see in my mind, that image in my mind is not there. When we are worried, for example, certainly worried about the future. I've been in the position before where I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. If I'm going to be able to make it through the next 6 weeks or what the future is going to hold. And I'm freaking out because I don't have the answers. Well, I'm seeing something that isn't there. I'm trying to see a future experience now, and that is impossible. And so not only am I trying to see a future experience that doesn't exist, but the future experience that doesn't exist, I'm imposing my fears onto it. And so now I'm seeing the possibility of a horrible future. I'm seeing the possibility of loss. I'm seeing the possibility of vulnerability. I'm seeing all these scenarios. So if you think in your personal life, you will recognize anytime that you've been in the experience of fear, it's because you're seeing the story in your mind play out. And that story in your mind playing out has been accepted as a reality. And so the Course says, I'm upset because I see something that isn't there. We'll take it back to the Starbucks example. When I was in Starbucks, what I saw was, in my mind, I'm seeing Craig, counterperson ignoring Craig having justification for being upset. This is all a scenario playing in mind. And because I've already judged and labeled and given meaning to everything, I'm blinded to the reality of life just being itself. In other words, grace unfolding. When I'm lost in my story, I am lost to being witness of life just being without complication. My story is an insistent story of how things should be instead of how things are actually happening. And so my mind, I'm imprisoned by my mind and its stories. And I'm seeing something that isn't there. Even the idea of who I am, when we see ourselves in our mind as an image, when we think ourselves, what am I going to be doing tomorrow? All of a sudden, an image of us going to church or going to work or doing something, that image in our mind isn't us. We're seeing something that isn't there. It is a manufactured idea for which we've identified with. So as we open our minds to this idea, I'm upset because I see something that's not there, we're always seeing things that are not there. And so as we are reminded in the first couple of lessons, these thoughts do not mean anything. These images do not mean anything. Like, we're training the mind to loosen up from our attachments. The Course is saying you don't have to believe these lessons and what they say. Just do the lesson. Just remind yourself these thoughts don't mean anything. And in that reminding, little by little, we will be shown clearly how we've been so preoccupied with these thoughts and how these thoughts have taken over. And in the experience of where we feel fear, we can see it and become aware. This is a journey of expanding awareness. We're going from a limited perspective of the human being and personality, the one filled and conditioned with beliefs and thoughts, projections and judgments. We're going from that limited, tight self-identity as a person to now an expanded sense of awareness of, wait, I'm questioning all the meaning. I'm questioning why I think I was upset. I'm questioning. And with those questions, then the answer reveals itself through practice, through living these principles. I'm upset because I see something that isn't there. Anybody who comes to me that's upset, I know right away that in their mind, they have images and stories playing out. And sometimes those images and stories that play out no question, overwhelm us to the point in which we don't see a way out. We are seemingly blinded. And this is where the principles of the course are so helpful, because they're a kind of a hand to pull you out. And that's the purpose of even these joinings and mighty companions. A mighty companion is someone who may be saner in the moment, to help us come out of the fog of story, the fog of thinking, the fog of the meaning we've placed on things. I mean, I don't know who's on this live stream, but I'll share with you really quickly. I've been through a lot of relationships, but my first relationship, falling in love and breaking up, was like the hardest thing to me, because it was my first love, and it was my first experience, and there was so much meaning that was given to it, and there was so much judgment placed on the experience and what I thought it was about. And I thought I understood. You see, when we think we understand, when we think we know, we pigeonhole ourselves into a very hard, less than agile kind of way of handling situations. And so we seem to break, and we seem to hurt really hard. And so I remember having a really tough breakup, because it meant the world to me. Now, fast forward 25, 30 years, certainly a lot of undoing and a lot of understanding, and recognizing that the meaning really wasn't what I thought it was. And certainly now with the course, I'm reminded I've given meaning, all the meaning it has for me. And so there's a lot of growth and awareness in that. But that's what we're doing here, and that's the training. It is this widening of the scope of perspective, to see the world and everything differently. And when we loosen ourselves up and off and away from what we've conditioned ourselves to think and be, then we can truly experience what freedom is. We can truly experience the joy of what the Course, the experience of joy, what the Course is offering. Lesson 7 says, I only see the past. I only see the past. And so when the Course says you only see the past, what the Course is saying is your perception is tied to your conditioning and into your storytelling. And so because you believe so much in your storytelling, and you believe so much in your stories, the way you look at the world is through the reference of the past. And some of you may have experienced this. I know sometimes people who are, maybe afraid of falling in love because they've been heartbroken in the past. They carry that vision of the past, or that experience of the past, with them. And so now they have a hard time potentially falling in love, being in a relationship, or afraid of it. I see only the past. I judge, again, everything before before it is, everything is allowed to just be itself. I've already judged. I see only the past. I come with my conditionings. I've decided what everything is and what it should be in advance of knowing what it would be. And that will always lead to suffering. In addition, if I'm seeing the past, then it must mean that I'm making decisions based on the past. Now, what happens if I make decisions based on the past? I'm going to have experiences of the past. If I see only the past, which means I'm acting out my conditioning, I'm acting out the ego's thought system, I'm believing what I've been taught, I'm listening to the scenarios and thoughts and minds as if they were truth. If I'm doing that, and I'm basing decisions and choices, and I'm moving my way around the world using references of the past, then I will have more experiences of the past. My life will feel like it's a circle. Here I am again with that same problem. Yet again, I fell in love with someone I should not have. Yet again, I got myself into debt. My life experience, I've actually been in major debt like 3 or 4 times. Like I literally went from coming out of college with like 30 or $40,000 in debt, getting rid of it, being zero and debt free, and promising myself I would never get into debt. And then following year or 2 years later, back into debt, $50,000 in credit card debt. Miraculously getting myself out of that, being down to zero, then coming back up and being back in debt. It's like, why is this happening? Well, because I only see the past. In other words, the decisions that I'm making are based on the experiences of the past, and I've given them meaning. In other words, I've said, okay, in the past, this is what has made me happy. This is what has protected me. I've given meaning to things of the past. And so I'm seeing the past, living the past, and I'm experiencing the past. Now, hopefully, after 2 or 3 times of making these kind of mistakes or seeing how these situations have kind of emerged in my experience, after seeing it once or twice, hopefully we're questioning it and say, wait, enough's enough. There's an awareness that, wait, there's got to be something more. And that really is the call to truth. There's got to be something more. Of Course in Miracles says we are capable of much procrastination and can endure a lot of pain, but both have a limit. And so here we are. We're reviewing the first 7 lessons of A Course in Miracles. Lesson 1 was nothing I see in this room means anything. Lesson 2, I have given everything in this room all the meaning it has for me. Lesson 3, I do not understand anything I see in the room. Lesson 4, these thoughts do not mean anything. They are like the things I see in the room, on the street, from this window, in this place. This is my favorite of the week. My thoughts, these thoughts do not mean anything. How freeing is that? Lesson 5, I'm never upset for the reason I think. If I think my upsetness is being caused by something of the world, I am wrong. It is because it's being caused by some way of thinking. I am upset. And lesson 6, I am upset because I see something that is not there. The scenario that I hold in mind is a scenario in my mind. So I'm seeing something that is not there. It isn't reality, no matter how convincing it seems. And that's the hard part, because the world is very convincing. Of Course in Miracles says the illusion is just as real in its effects as is the truth. So we cannot underestimate how convincing things can be. But lesson 6, I am upset because I see something that is not there. Do not trust your senses. Lesson 7, and the last lesson that we are going over or have gone over, is I see only the past. So that concludes this week's sharing on Lessons of Love with A Course in Miracles. I hope that you will continue to embark on the lessons for the next week, and I will be here next Saturday to join and share on the next 7 lessons. Thank you, everybody. I love you. Also want to make mention really quickly, if you're inspired to join me, I'll be at a retreat, Happy Dream Retreat in Los Angeles, and you can learn more about that just by visiting my site or Facebook timeline. I love you, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Goodbye, everybody.